Is Brimstone Sands good enough to save New World? That is the question. This is going to be sort of like a review, but really it's going to be more like a hands-on first impressions. Because whilst I've played the PTR for a good few hours, I obviously haven't finished the zone. I haven't finished the main story. I haven't done all the side quests. I haven't seen everything that there is to see. Now I think you actually get blocked doing the main story at some point, so you like physically can't. But I think I've done enough. Before we start though, I just want to thank my YouTube members. Thank you very much to you guys. I do really appreciate it. And if you want to support the channel, that truly is the best way to do so. Now there might be some mild spoilers during this sort of review. However, I'm going to try and keep them to an absolute minimum. So let's start out with the good. Visually, Brimstone Sands is amazing. There are some views and vistas that when you're playing the game, you just stop and go, wow, that's incredible. New World's visuals and sounds have always been pretty damn good and impressive, and here it sort of really feels like they're showing their best work. The new zone is certainly not a copy and paste from any kind of thing you've seen before. There's lots of new NPCs to fight that are definitely not reskins. A lot of them have like new abilities that you've not seen before. There's new bosses in elite zones, some of which only spawn at certain times of day, and by this point you've probably seen that there's a couple of new environmental triggers that may be leading to a world boss in the future. Like, there is just so much to appreciate about this zone. It is crazily beautiful, and the main quest is pretty decent. It leads you around the zone, and as you progress in the main story, it then unlocks some side quests that are related in that area. And the quests are decent, and the rewards are good as well. For some of them, you'll get a legendary item, but you often get gypsum orbs and umbral shards. Now I didn't find any of these myself, but apparently there are some of these like roadside encounters, which are basically like things that are going to happen at the roadside that'll lead you to a secret. That sounds pretty cool. I've yet to be able to find any, so quite secret it would seem. The Iliad looks like a pretty decent endgame expedition. Nice to see that added to the endgame roster. Just in general, the zone itself has a lot of positives, and the new features that come along with this patch are also pretty cool. So the main one is the ultimate ability, the Heart Rune Gems. Now they're not truly ultimate abilities, they just sort of function like one, and this is unlocked as a side quest as you progress with the main story. And the ability system itself I think is pretty cool. I do think having to run all of the old dungeons to get the drops is a little bit weird, but maybe that's just to make sure that that old content is still relevant. But overall I really do like having that ability. I like that as progression. The next thing is the new types of gems, and this is a cooler system than I realized. So I didn't put two and two together until I watched Damon's video, but it looks like the runes that you unlock as you go throughout the zone, those correspond to a specific type of rune glass. So once you've unlocked that rune, you can then create that rune glass gem. Pretty cool. Now these gems are just sort of like improved gems. Basically they're nothing too fancy in terms of gameplay, but in terms of crafting them, that's a really cool system. The other thing that I'm not going to dwell too much on because I don't want to go into like spoiler territory is the story. So one thing that we sort of knew was coming, but it's nice to see confirmed with my own eyes, is that there is going to be a proper cinematic cutscene, and probably more than one. Now you actually don't see the cinematic cutscene on the PTR, it just gives you like a placeholder, but we sort of knew that from the first PTR. Either way, a cinematic cutscene is going to be very appreciated. Not only that, but some of the journals that you have to read as part of the quest, they're also voiced, so you get a lot more interaction with the story, even if you're not really trying in a sense. But the one that I definitely will not be showing is the in-game cutscene. I can't show you because it'll instantly show you like a spoiler, and I don't want to do that, but we have an actual in-game cutscene using the engine in-game. Like, this isn't a cinematic cutscene, it doesn't take you to something else, it actually just is like the models that you see in-game, the camera sort of moves and it sort of tells a story with some characters talking to each other. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? And what's weird, I actually now remember that story even though I wasn't trying to pay attention to it, because it was told to me in a way that I could understand and digest relatively easily and quickly. This does now mean that New World can actually do stories if they put their efforts there. I mean, they were doing stories, but they definitely weren't feeling as good as it feels when you actually see it in game. I think that's a big change, and don't underestimate it. Okay, so let's have a look at the not so hot stuff in Brimstones, which is weird because it's a desert, so it is hot. But a couple of these I am actually torn on. People are complaining about Brimstone being too big, and to be fair, it is massive, and there is a lot of empty space and a lot of running about. I mean, it is a barren desert zone, so some of that is to be expected. It's essentially part of the flavour of the zone, so I'm personally not too bothered by this. There's definitely areas in the game where I think, hey, there should be something to do here. Maybe there should be some more NPCs or something. It just feels a little bit weird for it to be so barren. But this is the PTR, and maybe this isn't the final product. Maybe NPCs will be added to areas that we just didn't expect initially. I've seen a lot of people talk about how mounts would be really good for Brimstone Sands, and at this point you have to sort of agree with that. There's a lot of space. The teleporting doesn't seem too like frequent. Yeah, I think mounts in the Brimstone Sands would make a lot of sense. One pet peeve that I do hope they get right before the launch of Brimstone is the mob respawn timer with the main story mobs especially. Having to sit around waiting like 10 minutes before one person spawns that you may or may not get attacked because there's so many people around is really frustrating. I thought those days were done and over. Hopefully they'll get that right. It needs to be sorted for launch. And one issue, which really thinking about it, I think is just a new world issue that is made more apparent with Brimstone, is that the capital of Brimstone itself is a little bit empty. Not in terms of players, there's enough players rolling around even on the PTR, but in terms of what you can actually do there, there's not much that you can do there that you can do elsewhere, which to be fair, I think is just a new world territory problem. There's now over 10 zones and they all sort of do the same thing. Yes, you might have a gypsum kiln in one of them and not the other, but really they all offer the same stuff, all the same crafting stations and that kind of thing. But there's nothing really unique about Brimstone. There's no wandering NPCs. There's no activities that you can only do in Brimstone. And as I said, in a way, I think that's a broader issue with New World. They're all the sort of same in terms of activities. And I think the fact that Brimstone is so big sort of highlights how little there is to do in it. And maybe, again, this will change over time. But yeah, I wish there was more like, I don't know, living things to experience in the city itself. I think that would be cool. But to be fair, it looks incredible and is truly amazing in terms of visuals. So what about the title of this video? Does Brimstone Sands do enough to save New World? Well, honestly, I'm not sure. I said beforehand that I think the lack of progression in a new zone may be an issue, but I have to say I do really like the new ultimate ability and the new rune glass gem system. I think they're pretty cool. And I think for existing invested players, these new systems are just going to be enough to keep people around. If you're already playing, you know, you're just getting more game. I don't know if people will want to do all of the new quests if you're already like a maxed out gear score character. I just don't know. I don't know if there's a big enough incentive other than just wanting to get them off your map. So I think for existing players, the new kind of progression scrapes through, passes the test. I think people will be happy enough. Now for returning players who are coming back to the game, I'm a little bit less sure. I think a lot of them will just play, enjoy the story, enjoy the content, and then probably take a break again. And that's completely fine, by the way. A lot of them will sort of do the content and then decide if it's something they want to stick around with on a more permanent basis. We know, for example, that we're going to get participation frequency changes when it comes to wars. We know that the gold spread is also going to be reworked when it comes to the territory system. So there's a lot of positive changes that might actually retain players. But I do think that there's actually a slight chance that Brimstone is effectively going to be overhyped. And I'm probably guilty of that myself, because I do maintain that Brimstone Sands patch is not like a true game changer in itself. More the fact that I think all of the changes that have been made since launch are now adding up to making the game feel like it's more complete. And having people come back to the game now, it's just a reason to get people back to the game, if that makes sense. What they'll find though is a more finished, more complete game, and I think they'll enjoy it a lot more. But I think overall this patch is more evolution rather than revolution, and some people might be hoping for revolution, but that's not what you're going to find here. So to sort of summarize, I think if you're an existing player, then I think this patch is more of the same but a bit better. If you are a returning player, then I think you'll notice all of the positive changes and you'll be happier, or at least more likely to stick around. It's also worth noting that Brimstone Sands is not an expansion in the true sense of the word. This isn't like Wrath of the Lich King or something like that. This is more like a content patch. So try and treat it as such. I think people might get the wrong end of the stick and be hyping it just a little tad too much. Now, I'm not going to speak about new players because I think if you're completely new to the game, you should probably at this point just wait for the fresh servers. Level there, enjoy the experience with everybody else. I think you'll have a great time. So overall, do you think I'm wide of the mark? Do let me know in the comments below. What you should definitely do is have a most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.